Dublin to me is always 1966. And of course 1966, 50 years ago, was the jubilee of the 1916 Rising. It was, so I was very interested in that. I knew nationalist families. I went to everything that was going on that year. It was very much De Valera's commemoration. He celebrated the lives and the executions, and the lives that ended with execution, of the 1916, the signatories of the Irish Proclamation, and he celebrated particularly the men who were executed. Some of them were signatories and some of them were the commandants, like Ned Daly, were the commandants. He was the commandant at the Four Courts. So I knew the people.
How about, since you brought up your being for the celebration of 1916 and that was 1966, how compare that to how it's being celebrated this time?
Oh, sure.
The differences.
Yeah. So in 1966, it was very much De Valera's celebration of the heroes, and the emphasis was on the heroes of 1916. As I say, the men who were executed, with the exception of himself, that is De Valera, because he was born in America. You know, people don't perhaps know that James Connolly was a U.S. citizen, but he hadn't been born in America, and they really wanted him off the planet. But the difference, I think, in 1966 and 2016, particularly here, but Ireland as well. Let me speak about Ireland first. In 2016, the celebration looked at ordinary people. Joe Duffy has a wonderful book about the children under 16 who were killed in 1916. They pay attention to the men, the Irish men, who fought on the Somme during the First World War. The celebration is much more inclusive. It looks at civilian casualties. It looks at other Irishmen fighting in 1916. And for us here in New York, it was a very important time for us to look at the American contribution to the Rising, the American contribution to Irish nationalism, but particularly the American contribution to the 1916 Rising. And so that the Rising was largely bankrolled from here. Of the people who were shot for their part in the Rising, Pierce came to New York, James Connolly lived here, Tom Clark was here, Sean McDermott was here, Pierce, of course, was here raising money for his school, De Valera was here, so that the connections back and forth were very, very strong. And of course, Roger Case.
Sort of an overview of the overall experience of 66 as opposed to 16. Okay. Is there a different flavor?
Yeah, 1966 was Dublin-centered. It was more of a military commemoration. It was a march by, it was a flyover, sharpshooters on the roof, you know, it was that sort of thing. And as I say, it was a rather triumphalist De Valera staged, whereas 2016 more inclusive. And as far as the American celebration, and we have an exhibition up at the American Irish Historical Society, it looked more at the contribution of Irish America to the Easter Rising. So if I could describe it in one or two words, I would say 2016, a much more inclusive look at the Rising, anchored in the historical past that we haven't looked at.